So, as mentioned before, my name's Fletcher Nickel, currently engineering lead at Chef since December. So, I've been working a little more full-time for a few months on everything Test Kitchen and related. So, we'll probably touch on some of that work today because, frankly, I want more people to see it now. So, as speakers for this year, Chef was nice enough to actually provide a slide deck for speakers if they wanted to use it. And I thought, cool, there's like sample slides. I want to try and use them all. So here's a graph. Here's the breakdown of our time allocation for today. So basically, it's in three parts. So the insert token is an introduction to Test Kitchen for people who have not seen it before. And for people who have seen it before, hopefully there'll be enough new different things that'll make your head scratch and make you want to go and try it. The part two, the strategy guide, is kind of some vignettes, stories of how I've used Test Kitchen over the last few years and how I've seen other people use it to solve maybe slightly atypical problems or things that come up frequently enough. So that's kind of why I said patterns. It's probably a little bit of a lie. Unless I give it a cool name, then it's a pattern. And then finally, the level up is just some kind of references for the reading and books that you might want to buy, maybe. I thought I'd mention this first just in case if we run long or over time, or you want to come and figure out how to find me to ask me a question. I'm going to make an attempt to head over to the pavilion like after this, basically for an hour afterwards for the kind of like extended questions or I was told there's like a screen there too, so we can plug in a laptop and try stuff. So that's my hope. So let's just do it. So this is going to be hopefully a quickish but different intro. So we'll see if it's actually quick or not. I'm trying out some new ideas for a way to explain this because some stuff has changed. So here's the ChefConf 2015 edition. This is the Test Kitchen's kind of logo and, I guess, branding of sorts, but with a new color palette. So what is Test Kitchen? This might not be the best description, but it is a description. It's essentially a test harness that lets you run your chef code, your automation code on a particular platform or multiple ones in like discrete isolation. So you have a way of saying, I need to do A, B, and C with this bit of code, so then, therefore, I need to test it like 3 times discretely. So there's a lot of kind of jargony and concept stuff to Test Kitchen, but it's mostly expressed through this kitchen YAML document. So if you've never seen YAML before, you could think JSON, or I guess if Python developers created a data markup, it might be YAML. So there is some indentation, weird stuff, but frankly, it was a little bit of an experiment when I put that in, and some people curse it and some people love it. You know, it's a toss-up. Sorry, was there? Pardon me?
JSON is valid YAML.
Yes, it is. JSON is valid YAML. You could write a JSON document. There would be a way if you wanted to override a particular class, you could write a JSON loader.
No, you can just put JSON in the kitchen.yml.
Oh my gosh, you could. That would go in the hack section. You could put JSON in the kitchen YAML if you do some ERB escaping. So this is kind of, I guess, a little stanza or block for platforms. You could think of platforms as like an operating system, or maybe it's a particular version of the operating system in a particular environment. So you might care about Ubuntu 14.04, but you might really care about a particular Amazon AMI if that's your deployment target, or maybe it's running it in a Docker container, or maybe you just don't care and it just needs to be the vanilla distribution and you can run it in a Vagrant box. So, and there might be stuff like network and that kind of thing. So platform, it's a bit of a vague idea, but most people treat it as sort of an operating system. So you can see there's basically 3 platforms we've got. We've got an Ubuntu one, the CentOS, and this Windows thing. So we've got suites is kind of the other, I guess, big idea in The original idea is you could think of it as sort of a chef run list and maybe some node attributes. So it might be the way that you would instantiate or use your cookbook. So a decent example might be you might have a MySQL cookbook, and you might have a recipe to install like the MySQL server and another recipe to install the client libraries on your application server. And it would be it would sort of be terrible to test both of those things on the same machine because the server requires the client libraries, so how do you know the client libraries actually did anything at all? So this is a way of saying like those are two different things. They need to run at least twice. They need to run one of these for each platform. So that's where we get into this like multiplication deal. And then you put the suites and the platforms together and you multiply them, and then you basically get instances, which are, you could think of them as your virtual machines or your nodes or whatever it is. So this is basically running kitchen list, which is a way to list your instances, and the bear flag is just hiding a bunch of details, which we'll get into in a minute. So this is just showing kind of the names of them for you. And you can see the orange is the name of the suite, and it's sort of compacted and massaged a bit so that they usually work out as host names. Sometimes they're long host names. I've learned a lot. And then the blue is your platform name. So you can kind of see what you're actually going to run. And you're going to see my little project that I didn't think had much complexity, I've actually got like 6 things in there. And you can kind of see how the multiplication can really get away from you. So the Test Kitchen, it's a command line application, and there's subcommands that you kind of fire to do things you want it to do. Usually those map to what we'd call Test Kitchen actions. So that's kind of, they correspond to basically a very simple like linear state machine. So we've got kitchen create is maybe the first thing that you might potentially see. The idea for that is give me my instance, like boot it, provision it, get me like an EC2 instance or an Azure node. So it's basically it's up to the implementation of this driver, which we'll get to. Kitchen converge, you could think of this, we're at ChefConf, this is like the entirety of what you need Chef to do. So that's everything from installing Chef or a particular version to calculating cookbook dependencies, uploading files, doing a Chef solo or Chef client run, managing your solo.rb or client.rb, like all that stuff. That's converge. And then we've got verify, which is optional. It'll run through if there's nothing to do there. It's a no-op. But the idea is you kind of treat your converge, the thing that you do on the instance, as a bit of a black box. And the verify is a hook that afterwards you can go back and inspect what happened to assert that what you wanted to happen actually happened. And again, it's depending on your level of comfort and your journey into this crazy stuff, you might ignore that and just count on a Chef client run exiting cleanly, because that sometimes delivers like so much value right there, and you can just call it a day and call that a win. And then destroy is just the symmetry of create, because you probably don't want to keep EC2 instances up and then get your credit card bill at the end of the month. I can speak to that. And then kitchen login, it doesn't really fit in the state thing, but the idea is this kind of came out of I use Vagrant a lot. I still use Vagrant a lot, and after doing after Chef may be behaving not as I expected, I want to go into that instance, log in somehow, poke around and see why didn't this work, or what happens if I change permissions on that and then run Chef again? Is that actually what I need to do? So your way to dip into the laboratory, I guess. And then kitchen exec is basically just a way to fire an arbitrary command. So if you need to run uptime for some weird reason, you can just sort of do that without using login directly. There's kitchen test at the end. I'm putting this on purpose late because unfortunately I think a lot of people start with that, and then they're kind of everything's sort of slow. And then as soon as I can unpack why that is, then people are kind of back and fast. So all of those things you can think of create through destroy. That's what kitchen test does. It just steps through them one at a time. So if you have an instance up, it'll destroy it first, then it creates it, converges, verifies, and then by default on the command line, if everything is clean, then it cleans up after itself and calls destroy. So there's a few modes that you can adjust the behavior on the destroy, because you might want to, if your chef run dies, kitchen test isn't going to destroy it for you, because you might want to log in immediately to see what the heck happened. But in CI, you probably don't want that, because that could be a credit card bill charge. And then kitchen setup is it's sort of down here, and it's grayed out because, at least as of Test Kitchen 1.4, that plays a much more minor role. It's kind of there now for backwards compatibility, and you can, if you're new to Test Kitchen and you're installing the 1.4 release candidate, which I would encourage everybody to try, kitchen setup's there, but you can ignore it. It'll just skip over it. Now, kind of everything that happened in setup, which was basically preparing this plugin to do verification, it all happens in verify now, because it just made a whole lot more sense. So the idea here is Test Kitchen has a bunch of plugins, and the plugins implement these actions, so that the actions that were up there. And there's 4 types of plugins we got. So the driver, if anyone's used Test Kitchen before, you've probably selected a driver like Vagrant or Docker, EC2 to do your work. Provisioner, you could think this is basically doing a Chef solo run or a Chef client local mode run. That's called Chef Zero in Test Kitchen. There's a new one called a Verifier. And for anybody that's used Test Kitchen and has run Busser plugins, Busser is now a verifier. So it's an implementation of a verifier, which means now if Busser's really in your way, or you think you have a better way to do verification, you don't have to use Busser anymore. It's now just a plugin, and it's something you could subclass and modify, or completely plug something else in. So I have some ideas there that we can maybe flesh out, maybe at the hack day. And then finally, transport, which is sort of the communication medium. It's how Test Kitchen communicates with the instance, so how it executes commands and uploads files, and a few other things. So the idea here is the drivers are responsible for these create and destroy. The drivers look like this in a configuration block. So this is an example of choosing a Vagrant driver, and we've given this instance more RAM than maybe was the default, and then we've set up a private network. And sadly, that's not great syntax, and it goes really long. That was kind of the easiest way to inject that into a Vagrant file, so I kind of apologize for that, but that's a very hard one to make look pretty. And here's some drivers. It's kind of unsorted. This is stuff in the wild, and it's not exhaustive. All these plugins are shipped as Ruby gems, which means you can publish your own driver to Ruby gems. You can put it on GitHub and use a gem file, like use Bundler to pull it in. You can install it into your own ChefDK. You can run it on your own GitHub Enterprise for your own proprietary cloud. Never tell anybody to publish it, and you've got no upstream work or forking to do. So it just lets you do what you need to do. Then we've got provisioners. Again, they're responsible for the entirety of Converge. So here's an example of choosing Chef Zero and overriding the node name. I know this has come up where people sometimes need to set a node name. That's a way to do it. And then we're just setting up basically a run list with one item. So these are some provisioners. The first 3 basically ship in the core of Test Kitchen. So Chef Solo, Chef Zero, it's a bit of an old term. This predated Chef client in local mode. That's basically what it's going to do. So it's going to spin up a little Chef Zero instance for you on this node and pretend like you're talking to a Chef server. And if your version is sufficiently old of Chef, it's going to install Chef Zero for you and give that a shot. And then the shell one was actually the most obvious thing that I didn't think of until somebody submitted a PR for it. That started off, it's basically you just provide bootstrap.sh in your project, and it'll just run that. So just nice and simple. People have used that to bootstrap Chef in bizarre or non-traditional ways, or get other provisioners up. So there's other provisioners out there. People seem to be happy with them. I haven't used them quite as much, probably for obvious reasons and time. But I'm always interested in making anybody's experience with Test Kitchen better. So. And then the verifiers now, that you could think Busser. Now Test Kitchen puts that responsibility of verify completely on this verifiers as a plugin. So here's about the only example probably we've got so far. This is selecting Busser. That will be the default for everybody, so you've got no extra work to do. But here's an example of maybe you wanted to pin to a particular version of Busser on Ruby Gems. I think this happens to be the latest one. But if you wanted to do like an RC, if something like that got pushed, you could basically override the version of Busser that's going to get installed. And I think there's a lot more config we can add to that over time to select versions of Busser plugins and that kind of thing. Yeah, and there's only one right now, unless somebody's written something, and they'd have to know that by tapping my brain and tracking master in Test Kitchen last month. So I'm pretty sure this is the only verifier out there. And then finally, transports. They are responsible for two actions, the login and exec. So they understand how to talk to your instance. And here's an example. I'm super happy that it's out there now. The Test Kitchen ships with two transports, SSH and WinRM. And this would be an example of choosing the WinRM one, which means you are issuing commands over WinRM, so you're issuing PowerShell commands, and you're transferring files over WinRM, which was not easy, but it works. And again, so yeah, here's the two transports, but again, this is a plugin, which means if you have a better idea, if you want to figure out another way to communicate with instances, now this is a plugin as a concern. So I would love to see somebody do like a telnet to a network switch, or who knows what. And in terms of these kind of plugins, you can think of them as config blocks. They can kind of live in three places in the Kitchen YAML, in that sort of global common part of the YAML document. You can also put any of them inside or under any like platform name. So if you need to just customize like your Ubuntu one to set something about the provisioner up slightly differently, you can do that. Or you can put it in any suite. So I don't know if this is a bit of more clear example of that. We've got this driver in the kind of common position for Docker, which means that all the instances by default are going to be using the Docker driver. And then in the platform here, we're using the Vagrant driver, so we're overriding that default and setting that to Vagrant. And because we only have one platform and one suite, there's only going to be one winner, and that's actually going to be the suite one, has the highest order of precedence. So I overrode it again in the suite. So once you do kitchen list, you're going to see it'll pick up the EC2 driver, basically. But this allows you to do nice stuff like, say, Vagrant's my default, but I'm testing Amazon Linux. So for this one, I want to swap the driver out and make it EC2 because it needs to call out. So you can do kind of nice things, or say, I want to use Docker by default, but for my Windows VMs, I want to use Vagrant, or Azure, or, sky's the limit. And kitchen list is basically a command that's going to give you output kind of like this, which is showing you, here's the instance names, and essentially here's all the plugins that it determined that you need. And then kind of the last known sort of state where it is. So if you come back to a project with VMs maybe running and you don't really know what was going on, that's hopefully your hint. And finally, this kitchen diagnose, I would say this is really useful to everybody, not only plugin developers or people for support, but when you start to get confused about how all this merging happens, and if you have kitchen local files and something in the global or something's not booting, kitchen diagnose is supposed to be the way that you can help to figure this out. Or if you can't, that's probably what I'm going to ask on GitHub or IRC is, can you run kitchen diagnose? And you'll basically get output in a YAML format, so you can theoretically load this into a tool. And it's going to show you everything you'd probably want to know, like the version of Test Kitchen that's running, all the plugins that were chosen, all of their kind of rendered merge configuration, so you can figure out, if I wanted to plumb this value through but it didn't make it, you can at least confirm that to know that Test Kitchen is going to do the wrong thing because it wasn't fed the right data. So yeah, so that's kind of Test Kitchen a bit in a nutshell. I thought I'd go through a few of these, yeah, I could kind of call them patterns, but kind of ways that I've used Test Kitchen on various projects. So a big one for me is I've got sort of a safe sandbox that I can kind of kill at random to just try new things, try new technology. So if I'm looking at spinning up a new service that I've never done before, or another cookbook, it's kind of like a safe space to run that stuff without maybe impacting a larger audience, because at the end of the day, you can always kitchen destroy and it goes away. I think I might just actually skip to this one, because this was actually pretty relevant to my needs in working on the Windows support in Test Kitchen 1.4. I did not know PowerShell, at least until a couple months ago. So I had to kind of figure this out a bit, and this was, I guess, a project that I had a need when I wanted people to use pre-releases of Test Kitchen and have people install it into ChefDK. I kind of wanted just like a command you could run that would do that, which was fine, but then after all the Windows work, it felt kind of silly not to also have the PowerShell script as well as the Bourne script. So what I did, we'll see if this works. There's that. We'll see how legible actually this is. Okay. Have to find my mouse. Is that showing up? Or no. This is the fun of Tmux, by the way. There we go. Okay. Let me go in here. So in this project here, it's on GitHub, and yeah, my goal was to be able to tell people, here's how you can update your ChefDK install to the latest version of Test Kitchen without knowing a whole lot about how the app bundler process works and the Git cloning and that kind of thing. So it's basically a little Ruby script with a shell wrapper, like a Bourne shell wrapper and a PowerShell wrapper, just to invoke it. Actually, no, this one was a batch one for reasons. But how I was actually kicking it off was in test integration. You'll see I have two Bootstrap scripts. So for this project, I'm using the shell provisioner, so I'm not even doing chef. And the reason is because I wanted to install the ChefDK package so that I could change it. So in this project, you can see it's kind of not really doing anything chef related. It's just running this shell script, but the shell script, I needed a couple bits of software because I was just testing this on Ubuntu, so they kept it nice and easy. And basically telling the install.sh that I want ChefDK instead of the Chef Omnibus package. And then basically go invoke the script that I wrote to upgrade to, it looks like a beta release of Test Kitchen. And if all that came back fine, then I'm just going to call it a day and see if it works. So, but I also had to write the equivalent PowerShell. And so this is not necessarily the most glorious and correct code. It's also really compacted, and that was because I actually stole a lot of code that was in Test Kitchen, and there were some reasons why the number of characters I had to work with was there was a very hard limit to that. So that's why there's a lot of code in like single lines. But anyways, I had a way of basically letting Test Kitchen run this for me to make sure that what I was going to give people would work on their Windows workstations, because that's not my typical experience, at least right now, day to day. Now, let me go back out here. So I think I will go back to my slides. So another thing that comes up an awful lot, and when I was doing more consulting work, this came up especially for people who are already using Chef, is kind of supporting multiple platforms. So this is a code fragment of pretty much the first kitchen YAML-ish thing. This was actually when the code base was Jamie CI. So this wouldn't actually boot in Test Kitchen today, but you can kind of see what I was sort of going for is I wanted to get like these platforms with like these Chef things, do it in Vagrant. I can go to sleep, come back in the morning, see if it worked. Then kind of a couple weeks later, it sort of morphed into this one where we've got this like driver plugin and driver config stuff, and there's like now attributes instead of JSON. So this was like 2-week-old Jamie CI code, but it still works if you just rename the file to kitchen.yaml. It actually works, so yay. And then this would be probably the equivalent that somebody might write today with a few kind of convenience things. So it's possible if you really want, if you don't want to add that second line under driver for name : vagrant, this does work as well. It'll just default, if there's a string value there, it assumes that's the name. So that works for like provisioner and transport and all those things too. And same with run list. I tried that by accident, not having an array, and that works too, because I guess we coded it that way. So what I tend to use this the most for, and at least in terms of being a maintainer of cookbooks over time, is upgrades for various things. But you could picture this in your workplace. Even if you think, well, all I care about is like CentOS 6, because that's what we're all deployed on, you can kind of see how it goes crazy as time marches on. So if we had something like this, I just care about CentOS 6.5, and I got my org app server cookbook thing, and I can just run that and get some value out of that. That's cool. That's awesome. Test Kitchen's doing its job, I hope. And you end up with one instance, so you've got like one thing to worry about, which is great because you've got like one code path probably for your cookbook. But then time marches on, and now you've been told that we're upgrading our platform or our distribution, and maybe it's not like we're not even moving off CentOS. We're just going up to version 7. This is now that opportunity to see your Chef code not behave the way you thought it might on a slightly updated version of an operating system. It just happens. So I use this all the time to figure out, like, does this code work here? Yes. Does it work there? Oh, boy, no, it doesn't. I have work to do. And then as you work on the new one, you're potentially breaking the old one. So you've got at least this way of keeping yourself honest and knowing, like, still works on the old one, almost works on the new one, still works on the old one, works on the new one, still works on the old one. I think we're good. But see, yeah, now you have 2 concerns, and you don't have one, because you probably want to run. You're probably looking at eventually deploying to CentOS, or maybe you've got a mixed environment. So now your cookbook is targeting a heterogeneous environment, which maybe you didn't intend before, because you're thinking my company just uses CentOS. But this is kind of how complexity. This is just what happens. And then something like maybe Chef says, hey, Chef 12 is out, and you've been running Chef 11, or Chef 13 comes out. This is maybe another opportunity to test to see if your stuff works with a new version of Chef. So there's a few ways you can kind of attack this. One way is to kind of make use of the suites and kind of treat your platforms as the stationary target, and your suite as I'm running my cookbook, but also with this version of Chef. So I want to use version 11, or maybe you have it pinned to a particular version of 11, and then 12. So you'll see those require Chef Omnibus versions. They're not like a fully qualified version thing, so Test Kitchen's going to get you the latest of 11 or the latest of 12. Or if you're running version 11 and it's on there, it'll just use it. And what you get out of that is this: now you've got a matrix of 4 things, because you're testing your old version of CentOS, your new version of CentOS, your version with Chef 11, and your version with Chef 12. So now you've got twice the amount of work to do and verify. Or maybe you could attack it a different way and put those like Chef upgrade concerns into the platform. Because maybe what you're really worried about is we are upgrading, and that's in short order, but we're also upgrading our old fleet. And frankly, the new fleet, the CentOS 7, is always going to have the latest anyways, because we'll be going live with that. So maybe really what you need to test is Chef 11 and 12 on CentOS 6.5, and then the latest on CentOS 7. So here's kind of another way you can attack that problem. And you'll see we've got just the one suite that's always running the same cookbook. So in that example, you're actually getting 3, you're not getting 4. So maybe that more targets what you're after. And there's other ways with the kitchen YAML that you can kind of drop instances. So if one of those combinations don't apply, you can kind of just drop it off the map. And if you happen to get into maintaining open source cookbooks, you might find cookbooks like this in the wild. I don't know if Sean's still here. I took a look at the MySQL cookbook a few weeks ago just to kind of see what the state of things was, because I knew that Sean had been working pretty hard on a lot of platforms. And so maybe we can actually take a quick look. That is in... Oops. That's okay, good. Multi-platform. All right. So I took a look at so this is basically the line count of this kitchen YAML, and I went, what the heck is he doing? And actually, there was this .kitchen.cloud, so there's a way you can override and say, I want to use actually this, and that was even crazier. And I was wondering, what's going on? So when I took a look, it actually looked pretty sane. It's just actually testing everything that it's supposed to support. So a lot of versions of things, but also I think what's more crazy is all these versions of MySQL in a single node setup, and then all the same versions of MySQL in a multi-node setup. So it's testing it actually deploying like 2 services of MySQL on the same node so they can kind of communicate. But what that leads to when you do a kitchen list is, I think it's a long list. I think it was like 80-some. So this has always existed in our community. This has always kind of plagued community cookbook authors. The unfortunate part is we just never knew all that complexity really existed and never did the math for like, here's all the combination of things we should probably be trying. And sometimes it just takes somebody to kind of spell it out so you know, like, that's how hard like cookbook maintenance can get. But it can also give you some comfort if you run all of that and all those configurations coming back green, you're probably good to ship. So yeah, this was, I don't even think that shows up. Can anybody see anything on there? I actually tried to get a screenshot of the, I ran kitchen diagnose on it because that generated like 5,000 lines of YAML config. And I tried to make it smaller and smaller, and then Keynote crashed on me, so I had to take a screenshot of Keynote to put it in here. And then finally, I think if I've got enough time, I'll do just a few words about what I think it used to be probably the most common use case for Test Kitchen, at least in an era. I don't know what it is anymore, but I still run this all the time, which is, hey, I have a chef cookbook, and no Test Kitchen or no tests. Like, what do I do? Is my life over? Do I have to start all over again? So I would say no, just add it. So this was sometime within the last year working on the Heavy Water Kafka book. Actually, it's got the date on there. So it was in February last year. We had to do some crazier things to support. I think it was Run It, and then there was 2 versions of Kafka at the time, and they behaved totally differently. So again, you get into that matrix of complexity. So this was kind of the first stab that I took, which is just add test kitchen support, which was like adding some ignores and stuff, and basically adding like this smallest of kitchen YAMLs so that we could do nothing but like run the code in a couple different ways to make sure that Chef Client kind of came out okay. And sometimes that's about all you need to do. You can just start with running it on the platforms you need to, and if Chef is coming back 0, it may have done the wrong thing, but it didn't fail either. And sometimes that's enough information and confidence that you can kind of move forward. You can also, like at that point, once Chef's finished running, you can use Kitchen Login, go in and poke around, and if you take good notes about where you're looking and what you're poking at and looking at, you might be able to turn a couple of those things into like acceptance tests or integration tests at the end. That's usually how, so in this Kafka book, you can take a look in the test integration. We did, this was Shauna Screeve and I think we did a crazy thing where we set up Kafka and we set up is it a broker? And basically tried to send a message through it, but with terrible shellouts. So it didn't work all the time, but it worked most of the time, at least to prove that Kafka was set up. It was just our testing code was flaky. But sometimes that's all you need to just get a little more confidence in what you have that you know is sort of running. You can kind of at least put a bit of more confidence around it. That's something if it's passing enough of the time, you might be able to hand that off to a CI system and have that run on check-ins and that kind of thing. So yeah, we probably don't need to look at that now. And I'm going to just skip through some of these. So I was just going to show the kind of what the RVM cookbook looks like now. That was kind of patient 0 for Jamie CI and Test Kitchen at the time, which was testing lots of versions like operating systems and then compiling all the Rubies in different ways. So I guess there's some good talks about kind of thinking about this in a test-driven way. So I may, I don't know how much I have to add in about 4 minutes. What I will say though is, if you're starting something that's kind of greenfield and you kind of want to try this test-driven thing, it's fundamentally it's not a huge earth-shattering thing. If you know you have something like a web server that at the end of the day, if all this works, needs to be listening on port 80, that's something you could add a test for. Something maybe like, I wonder if I have, yeah, we could show the crazy one. Let's go test integration. I believe, yeah, these were all, the versions were just so different. Yeah. Yeah, this is good stuff. Yeah, this was like shelling out to like the wrapper script that calls stuff underneath. And so we could have started, if this was a new project, we could have started with something like this that we know should like yield a good result, and then kind of work back from that and figure out what's the code that we need to write to make this thing happen. That's probably a good place to start. But if you're more satisfied with kind of charging forward with Chef Cookbook stuff and adding stuff and keep running Converge and doing logins and then figuring out when you think done is, at that point you could write a test too. So I wouldn't sweat it too much, whether you're doing it kind of before, after, during, in between. I kind of do it all over the place. The most important thing is once you think you're there is either call kitchen test, which will destroy it and build it back up from scratch, or do a destroy so it's gone, and then a converge so you're building it back up. And I'm getting the hook. So I'm going to call it. There's lots more we could talk about. I would have shown you Windows spinning up. The problem is it takes about 3 or 4 minutes to boot, and I just did not want to cut that much into time. If you want to see it, though, we can try it in the booth. So that will be my plug to come over to the pavilion sometime in the next hour. I think 2:30 to 3:30. Sounds right? Yeah, so thank you.
Well done, Fletcher. My name is Patrick. I'm also room captain here. We're going to open it up for 10 minutes of Q&A. If you have questions, please just raise your hand. I see the gentleman over there, so we're going to start over there. I will try and get to you before we have the next talk here. Sweet. I'm going to start over there and come and get you guys, all right?
How do you see tests, other types of testing fitting in with Test Kitchen? Things like linting and syntax checking and all that jazz.
So they're probably pretty vital, and the feedback and the usefulness, it kind of depends on the context. So as a developer who likes working with code, stuff like linting and unit testing and stuff I love because they're really fast. They can give me a sense of like, am I on the right track? And the feedback loop is really tight. The downside, not so much with linting, but with unit tests is you're basically constructing a nice lie to yourself about like there's something that you're not doing in the real world. So I'm not saying unit testing is bad because I do it all the time. But if you really only had to pick one thing, kind of like one level of testing or something, that's why I ended up kind of sort of rage starting this. The unit testing is awesome, but like I just need to make sure it actually runs, even if it takes me 10 minutes. I need to see it running myself to at least prove that it's working. But as far as the unit and the linting stuff, that is generally happening outside of Test Kitchen because you can frankly run that on like the workstation that you're on or directly on the CI system that you're on. Usually, what I would do if you happen to have all that going, and I guess a plug for delivery, it is kind of hooking into having those as like hook points to do like a linting task and unit tasks and functional tasks. You can kind of play with the ordering for kind of what you think is the most important, or if you want to fail fast in your CI, then you might want to start at like doing your linting tests and failing quick, or maybe doing the units first to make sure there's some correctness, and then linting to make sure that the quality is okay, and then do the integration because that's expensive. Or maybe you care about it being correct first, so you do the integration first, which is the expensive one, but then you don't fail as fast. So they definitely all play a part. It's a good question. Yeah, well, the one that I've used, it's going to be totally punting the buck, but I tend to use a rake file. With like a rake task of test, and I usually make that the default. And so I can just run rake, and then it kind of does all the things. So that's not a really holistic, great solution, but I guess in the spirit of the small Unix primitive tools that you can like compose together, to this point, that's typically what I've done. But in my role at Chef, they have put me a little bit more in charge of the ChefDK stuff. So I suppose if there's any good ideas, that could be a landing place for those kind of like well-trodden paths of like, it'd be nice to do ABC in the basic case. That's probably a place that we could like start experimenting. Yeah. I don't know if I want a question from Brandon.
Okay.
No.
2 parts. One, I heard we might be doing a Hang-Ops on the Windows support next month.
Thank you very much. We're going to be doing a Hang-Ops on Windows next month.
Question is, kitchen.yaml examples, especially with the cloud providers. Is there a good repository of like, this is for the OpenStack driver, this is for the Azure driver? Like maybe, you're new to that provider, so you don't know all the details.
Frankly, there is a lot of reference documentation that I just have not done, and I feel pretty bad about that because I hope that would help a lot of people to see the pattern and to go, oh, it's just a bunch of data and it goes here and it feeds into here. A lot of at least the drivers and stuff that I've seen, the READMEs tend to be reasonable about like, here are the things that you can do to dial this or turn this off or on. Although I tend to look at lots of cookbooks in the wild, like stuff that's on Supermarket or that that I know somebody might have done crazier things with, just to kind of see examples. It's kind of the hard thing to figure out how that all composes together at first. Once you have the hang of it, though, yeah, you can do surprising combinations of things. Like at the end of the day, all these plugins, every instance has its own plugin instantiation and configuration. They're all like completely unique, isolated environments. So that's That's why you can do like running Docker over SSH with Busser, and then do like Windows and Vagrant, and like it can be a pretty crazy thing if you need it to be.
It can. Part of what I'm thinking is the platform stuff is sort of actually form-free text, so it's like, you know, how do I have an OpenStack cluster. Well, how do I say my Ubuntu 12.04 actually is a precise image? You know, like figuring out those kind of things is part of what I'm thinking of, like how to.
So I know particularly for the Kitchen OpenStack, that's got a very good README. So yeah, that would be, I think it's like image ID or something. But I agree. I would like, what I'm hoping I'll have a chance to do is actually get back to writing more. There's a getting started guide for Test Kitchen, but that's more of the like narrative journey, like you can do this and solve a problem. But we need more of the reference documentation for like, this is what a plugin looks like. This is how the configuration works. I will say that the Chef Docs site does have, I think I even have the link here. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can find it. I don't know if this will make it to video, but I can post these after. That's the one. So the doc site does have a, actually that's the one I'm thinking of. Does have a few pages on Test Kitchen, and one on the Kitchen YAML format, which looks actually like that's a pretty darn good start. And I will probably be giving it a read if anything looks like it could be fleshed out. That probably will be where I start. So I hope that's a little bit helpful. But yeah, that is something that I know is really deficient, which would be a lot more useful, like just reference docs. Pardon me? Yes, okay, so yeah. So is that Eric? So yes, Eric was reminding me and everybody that the kitchen diagnose command, what that's going to show you is here's all of the configuration you fed to Test Kitchen, and then all the defaults that all the drivers and transports have selected or computed based on other things. So it's going to render all that out, so you at least know this is how everything's wired. But it can also be a bit of a shopping list for things you can tune, because everything that shows up there that has like a number or a true false or a URL, you can override that. So that's something, when I was looking at this code base, there was some configuration settings that were being used but weren't like explicitly set, which means they're kind of like basically a hidden feature. So there was there's definitely more output in Kitchen Diagnose, because I'm trying to make a lot more things explicit. Anything that's relied on like a path being right or the file in the right place, eventually I want to make that, you'll see it in Kitchen Diagnose, which means you can override it so it's explicit. The implicit convention stuff was purely accidental. It just kind of worked for so long, and yeah, that needs to be cleared up. So I'm guessing we're probably at time. All right, thank you.
We're gonna do a follow-up.